Welcome to Zenith Global News, your trusted window to the world. Before we dive deep, here are the top headlines you can't afford to miss today. 1. Direct U.S.-Iran talks fail to reach resolution after lengthy negotiation.
2.
Trump announces naval blockade of Iran after Islamabad talks yield no deal. 3. Ceasefire means Netanyahu can't keep promises, many Israelis say as elections loom. 4. Are we heading for World War III?
5.
Prototype fast breeder reactor, nuclear paradox.
6.
Science snapshots, April 12, 2026. Now, let's dive into the details of today's biggest stories.
U.S.-Iran talks fail to reach resolution after lengthy negotiation. After more than 20 hours of marathon talks led by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the delegations failed to reach a resolution. Vance announced that the U.S. was quite flexible, but that Iran was ultimately unwilling to accept U.S. terms. The negotiations were mediated by Pakistan and held in its capital. The U.S. delegation included high-profile figures such as Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, while Iran brought a 70-person delegation that included military and parliamentary officials. Iran has occupied and mined parts of the strait, demanding the right to collect tolls and maintain control. The U.S. demands the waterway be open, free, and clear. The U.S. sought an affirmative commitment that Iran would cease uranium enrichment and dismantle tools used for nuclear weapons. Iran demanded the unfreezing of billions of dollars in assets and war reparations as a condition for peace. Disagreements persisted over the ceasefire in Lebanon and Iran's support for proxy groups. Following the collapse of the talks, President Donald Trump announced via social media that the U.S. would begin clearing out the Strait of Hormuz and potentially initiating a naval blockade of Iranian ports starting Monday, April 13th. The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz has caused global energy prices to skyrocket. AAA reported a 40% increase in U.S. gas prices since the war began, with officials warning of $5 gas if the blockade continues. Trump announces naval blockade of Iran after Islamabad talks yield no deal. The blockade could derail a tenuous ceasefire after just 5 days. Vice President J.D. Vance said the United States remains open to diplomacy if Iran takes our final and best offer. The high-stakes summit ended without a deal on Sunday morning, with the U.S. delegation departing Pakistan immediately after. Despite the failure to reach an agreement, the session was historic as the first direct, high-level face-to-face meeting between the two nations in decades. Vice President Vance characterized the outcome as bad news for Iran, stating that the U.S. had been flexible, but that Tehran was ultimately unwilling to meet the Trump administration's red lines. The primary cause of the breakdown was Iran's refusal to provide an affirmative commitment to dismantle its nuclear weapons tools . Vance emphasized that preventing a nuclear-armed Iran is President Trump's core goal. Control of this critical waterway remains a major point of contention. Iran has occupied and mined the strait, using it to collect tolls and exert leverage over global energy markets. While talks were ongoing, the U.S. military began setting conditions to clear the mines, with Trump stating the U.S. would clear the strait regardless of a deal.
Ceasefire means Netanyahu can't keep promises, many Israelis say as elections loom. Declaring victory now, for the second time in 10 months, makes it just a matter of time until a new round of fighting begins, some voters say, as the opposition sees an opening. While many Israelis felt relief at the pause in hostilities, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faced a wave of criticism from the political opposition and the public. Critics argue that the ceasefire was a unilateral move by U.S. President Donald Trump that sidelined Israel and failed to achieve the war's strategic objectives, namely the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear program and the collapse of the regime. The article reports that Netanyahu had no say in the 1-hour truce brokered by the US and Pakistan. Opposition leaders, such as Yair Lapid, characterized Israel as a protectorate state that now receives instructions from Washington via phone rather than being a partner in decision-making. Opponents like Avigdor Lieberman and Naftali Bennett argued that the pause gives the Iranian Ayatollah regime a necessary timeout to reorganize and rebuild military capabilities. They claim Netanyahu sold illusions of a total victory that has not materialized. Consequently, Israel stepped up its bombing campaign in Lebanon, including heavy strikes on Beirut that killed over 300. Retired IDF officials cited in the piece noted that while Israel achieved tactical success by damaging Iranian infrastructure, it lacks strategic closure. Netanyahu has responded by claiming the campaign is not over and that Israel's finger is on the trigger to resume full-scale war if terms are not met. Are we heading for World War III? Defense experts believe the world may be edging towards a form of conflict that is already underway, even if not yet fully recognized. The consensus among geopolitical analysts is that while a total global war has not been formally declared, the world has entered a period of interconnected conflicts that many describe as the early stages of a Third World War. The collapse of the Islamabad peace talks on April 12, 2026, is seen as a major escalation. Following the failure of Vice President J.D. Vance's negotiations with Iran, President Trump announced a U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, a move that analysts warn could force direct intervention from other global powers. Recent coverage highlights that the rules-based international order has largely collapsed. The magazine notes that conflicts in the Middle East, Ukraine, and potential flashpoints in Asia are no longer isolated events but are inextricably linked through military alliances and economic dependencies. The current global landscape has divided into two primary blocks, often referred to as the new Allied powers and the axis of resistance/revisionist powers. Because of the global nature of the conflict, there is significant interest in countries remaining neutral or isolated from the violence. Frequently cited safe countries in 2026. Analysts suggest the next 48 to 72 hours are critical. If the US begins forcibly clearing Iranian mines in the Strait of Hormuz tomorrow, and Iran retaliates against US bases or global oil tankers, the transition from a regional conflict to a global conflagration may become irreversible. Prototype Fast Breeder Reactor Nuclear Paradox. The 500 MW PFBR, a project decades in the making, has successfully transitioned from its commissioning phase to consistent power generation. This marks the formal commencement of the second stage of India's three-stage nuclear power program. Developed by Bharatiya Navikiya Vidyut Nigam Limited, the reactor is a global rarity, making India the second country after Russia to operate a commercial-scale fast breeder reactor. The reactor has begun feeding 500 MW of electricity into the southern grid. This is viewed as a crucial step in addressing India's long-term energy security using indigenous technology. Unlike conventional light water reactors, the PFBR breeds more fuel than it consumes. It uses a mixed oxide fuel of uranium-238 and plutonium-239, which produces more plutonium as it operates. The success of the PFBR is a prerequisite for the third stage of India's nuclear program, which involves using the country's vast thorium reserves. By converting thorium-232 into uranium-233 within these breeder reactors, India aims to achieve complete energy independence. Despite the technical challenges and delays associated with handling liquid sodium, engineers confirmed that all safety parameters were met during the ramp-up to full capacity. The operational success of the PFBR comes at a time of extreme global energy volatility. With the 2026 Iran war causing oil prices to spike and supply lines through the Strait of Hormuz remaining blocked, India's advancement in domestic nuclear capability is being hailed as a strategic shield against global fossil fuel shocks. Science Snapshots, April 12, 2026. PFBR success at Kalpaksum. The primary highlight is the successful core loading and stable power generation of the 500 MW prototype fast breeder reactor. Scientists at Pavini confirmed that the liquid sodium-cooled reactor has reached critical milestones, marking India's definitive entry into the second stage of its three-stage nuclear power program. ISRO's lunar water mapping. The Indian Space Research Organisation released new, high-resolution maps from its latest lunar orbiter. The data suggests that water ice deposits in the Moon's South Pole craters are more accessible and extensive than previously thought, which is vital for the planned 2028 human-robotic joint missions. Indian Ocean thermal anomaly. Climate scientists reported a record-breaking marine heat wave in the Bay of Bengal. Temperatures are 3.5 degrees Celsius above the seasonal average, which meteorologists warn could lead to an hyperactive cyclone season starting in May 2026. AL in Healthcare. A team from the Indian Institute of Science showcased a new AI-driven diagnostic tool that can detect early-stage Alzheimer's with 98% accuracy using simple retinal scans, significantly lowering the cost of screening. Breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity. The snapshot briefly mentions a collaborative study between Indian and Japanese researchers claimed to have achieved superconductivity at near room temperature under high pressure. A potential holy grail for energy transmission if it can be scaled.
Stay informed, stay aware, stay ahead. We'll see you in the next update, only on Zenith Global News.